that the ones for this week? For this week? I need to look at it real quick.
Well, no, it's next week.
Oh, that's next week. Okay. Is that this week's?
No, that's next week, too. Same one, Granny.
Well, 37 is next week. 35 is this week. I miscounted somewhere along the way. It's my fault. You need one? I've got my original in there, so if you'll remind me, I'll give it to you. Okay. All right. I was going to look because I think what I wrote down to talk about this week, I think you all talked about last week, so that's why I was wanting to check. Ezekiel is one of the books. In fact, I think God has spoken to me over the years more through the book of Ezekiel than a lot of other books. There are several different passages in it that just really jumped out at me. All through the book, it seems like almost every day as we're reading along, there will come a point where it says that God did this so that they would know that I am the Lord. Did they not know that God was the Lord? I couldn't hear. Made to be reminded, yes. They didn't act like it, definitely.
Kids would put it, I know, but I don't know.
Yeah, okay. I know, but I don't know, yes. Yeah, I think there might have been some head knowledge, but it was not being acted upon. It was not, it wasn't heartfelt. And so, yes, God needed to say that over and over and over. One of my favorite passages, actually there's two of them, but one is in chapter 2, and that's what I was wanting to know, whether you all talked about chapter 2. You probably did, but years ago when we lived in Gainesville, Texas, I was reading, doing my Bible reading through the year, and I read chapter 2, and it was like God was speaking directly to me. And when he tells Ezekiel that he's not sending him to a foreign people of unknown tongue, but sending him to the children of Israel. But he said that when they get to Israel, that those people won't listen to him. That their foreheads are like flint, is what it was, how it's described. Well, the same day, I think it might have been the next day, I was reading something in the New Testament. And I think it was the same day. I think it had some Old Testament, New Testament, and Psalms or whatever. In the New Testament, it was talking about Paul, and it said that Paul stayed there for 3 years and taught and did things. And again, that just jumped out at me. Well, 3 years later, I was called to Eufaula. And when all of that happened, it just, like I said, it reminded me of all of this stuff, that when God said, I'm going to send you to your own people, not to an unknown people of unknown language, my people would be Oklahoma. That's where I grew up. It's where I was born. And it was 3 years later. And anyway, we went. I interviewed with the committee. They took me up. Did you? No, you weren't with me the first time. I went to Eufaula and saw the church, met with the committee, and did all that stuff. And on my way home, I was thinking about this because it had been 3 years, and I'm like, God. I understand, the 3-year period. I understand that you're sending me to, my own people, but I don't understand that part where it said that their heads were like flint, right? Bob, what's the mascot at Eufaula? Ironheads. And as soon as that popped in my mind, I just died laughing. It's like, God, that's what you were talking about? You got a great sense of humor. That's hilarious that it's the Ironheads. But yes, God sent me there. And in another time, I was reading in chapters 8 and 9, and I know we finished 8 last week. We talked about 8, but chapter 9 goes right hand in hand with it. In chapter 8, it talks about how all of the evil within the nation of Israel, and it talked about the north gate being the gate of the idol of jealousy. There's a hole in the wall that they portrayed images of crawling things and detestable animals. That's in the temple itself. They were inside there, drawn on the walls. The elders were burning incense to idols. Women were mourning for Tammuz, which is the Mesopotamian goddess of fertility. And 25 of the leaders of the Levites and the priest were bowing down and worshiping the sun god. And when I was reading that, I mean, again, it was just like God speaking directly to me, and it really, it broke my heart thinking about all of that. Especially in verse 18 where it says, "Therefore I will deal with them in anger. I will not look upon them with pity or spare them. Although they shout in my ears, I will not listen to them." And I began to cry a little bit. I was just torn up over all of that. Well, in chapter 9, which is the first chapter I think we actually talked about this week or read this week, there were some heavenly beings that appear, 7 of them. 6 of them had swords in their hand, and one had a quill and a bottle of ink. And he was told to go out, this is in chapter 9, verse 4, "Go throughout the city of Jerusalem and put a mark on the foreheads of those who grieve and lament over the detestable things that are being done in it." And then in verse 5 it says, he told the others to follow him through the city and kill without showing pity or compassion. And it just really hit me that here, thinking about all the stuff that was going on in the temple really broke my heart, and I did start to tear up. And it's a good thing, because right after that is when God was just killing everybody that didn't. Now, I don't think he was directing that at me, but just the fact that those people, the bad things that were happening just didn't bother them. In one place it says that they've forgotten how to blush, right? So one of the things yes, I don't remember where I put this at. But it talked about the Hebrew alphabet, that the letter Tav. Do you remember her talking about that? What does that letter look like? An X or a cross, right? And how did that relate to the mark being put on the people? Yeah, it was very similar to the Passover, because the Passover was a shape of a cross. Mm-hmm. On the top of the door and the doorpost, and the blood would drop down on the threshold, so it would make a cross. Also reminding of the crown of thorns and the feet and both hands. That's where the blood was. Anything else? We just talked about it a few weeks ago. In Revelation, it talks about the believers during the tribulation period. Not the church, because the church is gone, but the believers during the tribulation period were also marked by God. Now, the ones that were not marked by God were the ones that accepted the mark of Satan, but God marked his people with a mark on their foreheads, whatever that was. It might have been the same kind of thing, just a cross. I don't know whether you all have read the Left Behind series, but in it, they say that the mark of the Christian could be seen by other Christians, but not by lost people. I don't know whether that's true or not. I think that may be just something they made up, but yes, it is kind of interesting. When the executioners have killed all those people, where were they to take the bodies? Yeah, threw them over the graves. Where else? One specific place that they were to take them. They threw them in the temple. Yeah, which desecrated the temple, right? And it was I think God was basically telling them that he had left the temple. His presence had left the temple. And but when God left the temple, it says that he departed, and this is in chapter 10, verses 18 and 19. The glory of the Lord departed from over the threshold of the temple and stopped above the cherubim. And while I watched, the cherubim spread their wings, and they rose from the ground, and as they went, the wheels went with them, and they stopped at the entrance of the east gate of the Lord's house. And the glory of the glory of the God of Israel was above them. And it says that he paused right there. I thought I had the verses that way. Why is that significant that he paused? He left the temple, got to the eastern gates, and stopped.
Well, didn't he feel like he would be considered the sanctuary, not the building itself?
Yes, well, that's true. I'm talking about God. Why did God stop right there? Yeah. Right. Yes. Is that it? I'm going to say it sounded like it was coming from over this way, not that way. Yeah, he regret, I don't know a good word. Yeah, I don't know of a good word, but I think it just broke his heart. And he stopped, and I think he stopped and looked back and was like, maybe just saying, why? I tried, and you just won't listen. Where did he go? Which direction did he go when he left?
Could you repeat the first part?
When God left the temple, which direction did he head? To the east. And what was east?
Garden of Eden.
Yes, it was. Later than that, though.
Gethsemane.
Later than that. Actually, before Gethsemane. In this time period, what country was east? Babylon. Who was in Babylon? The remnant. It was almost like God saying, I'm leaving the temple, I'm leaving, but I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to be with you. By the way, why, how did I put this? How did the remnant get selected to be the remnant? The ones that got to live? You wondered about that? Yes, they surrendered. A lot of them, that's why. But in the Bible, it says one other thing. It was the mercy of God. God chose. Did the remnant, were they better than other people? Were they repentant and that's why they got to live? Not really. It was just by the mercy of God, God said, I'm going to keep these. Why, we don't know, Why did God choose me? Why did he choose you? All we know is it's the mercy of God, right? It's nothing that we do. It's nothing that we're better than anybody else or that, we're repentant or anything like that. It has to do with God's mercy. Like I said, we're no better than anybody else. In chapter 14, it mentioned 3 men. And it said, even if these men were there, they would be able to save themselves, but not their own family even. Who were those 3 men? Noah, Daniel, and Job, okay? Noah, went through the flood. He was not perfect, got drunk right after that. Job, he was a righteous man, but if you look through the book of Job, they always talk about him having patience, but he didn't really have a lot of patience. He was complaining the whole time. What was significant about all 3 of those, by the way, all 3 of those men went through some very trying experiences. What's significant, though, about Daniel and this at this point? Yeah, he was in Babylon. He was still alive. They were, they knew who he was because Ezekiel's in Babylon talking to the people, and he said, "Daniel, I can point at him. He's right over there." That's kind of significant that he was, I guess, blessed in such a way, or that he followed God, because he did. He made a commitment to follow God, but it was such a thing that everybody knew him then, right now, because he was alive. It wasn't like hundreds of years ago, like the others. He was still there, still being a good example. Why did God do this? I don't know what question number, because I added questions. So the reason that God gave for bringing punishment to the nations around Israel, as well as to Judah and Israel, and I mentioned this earlier. Why did he bring judgment? So that they would what? Know that he was God, right? I like the way Darrell Ray brought out that in those days it was just kind of an understood thing. It wasn't necessarily what the Jewish people believed, but the other nations around there believed that their God was God of their nation. And if they went to another nation, then their God had no power there. And God was basically saying, I have power everywhere. And you would think that the Israelites would know that, because God led them out of Egypt. He did all of those different, the plagues and stuff to Egypt. He provided for them in the wilderness. He gave them the promised land. All of these different things that he used over and over to show he was powerful, and yet still some of them, I think, believe that. Right. Maybe. That may be true, that they didn't share it with their descendants. I just went blank on the word. I think it might have been Billy Graham, but somebody said that Christianity is just one generation away from extinction. And if we don't share the gospel with our kids, if we don't lead them to follow God, then all hope is lost, right? God confronts the people for using a proverb. Do you remember what the proverb was? Yes. Right. The parents eat the sour grapes and the children's teeth are on edge. What did he mean? What did the people mean by that? Yes. Specifically, it's that the sins of the parents would be punished. The children would be punished for the sins of their parent. And what did God say? No, that's not right. Each person will be punished for their own thing. And when God said that, how did the people respond? What did they say about God? You remember that? I don't know if that was one of your questions. Yes. Yeah. They were astonished by it. And basically they said that God was being unjust. Can God be unjust? No, that's part of his character. Does God take delight or take pleasure in the death of anyone? No, it's specifically stated in Ezekiel that God does not take pleasure in the death of anyone. Yes, he's always hoping that they will repent and turn. He knows, he knows what's going to happen, but I think he still hopes and that they will. Does this mean that everyone will eventually get to go to heaven? No, not at all. Does it mean, I'm going to pick on some people, but does it mean that you can pray them into heaven? No. The decision is made before you die.
Seems like you hear stories about people asking for prayer for them after they're
Right.
deceased.
It's a little late then. Yeah. Okay. In chapter 21, King Nebuchadnezzar is trying to make a decision, and he ends up consulting his mediums and his people. What was that decision? What was he trying to decide? Do you remember? Well, not to let him go. Which place to go to first? Was it Egypt? I don't have it written down. Where did he decide to go first? That's the important part. Jerusalem. He went there first. He consulted all his people, and they said, "Take the fort and go to Jerusalem first," and he did. And then God back in chapter 22, which I think that might be the last. I've got something else back here. God said he was looking for a man to stand in a gap. And what did he find? None. Found none. Makes you wonder about our nation. Yeah.
People to stand in the gap between
Yeah.
him and sinners.
That's right. Still looking for people to stand in the gap. And unfortunately, a lot of times I don't think there are very many people that will do that will stand up. And then at the very end, I think we just read about today, God told Ezekiel that his wife was going to die, and she died. But he told him to do something. What was that? Not to mourn. Yes. Has that ever happened before in the Bible? Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, when they offered, what was it? It had to do with the offering of fire. They either used incense that they weren't supposed to, or used God's incense for something else, and God put them to death, and told Aaron, because he had been, had the blood and the oil and all that stuff. He'd been ordained because he had all of that on him, that he could not mourn for his sons. And so it's not the first time that happened that they couldn't grieve. And then Tyre. It says in there that they're going to build, Nebuchadnezzar was going to build a siege wall around Tyre. Why is that unusual? Tyre's an island, yeah. How's he going to build siege ramp around an island? Yes. Yeah, I think it's metaphor. I think he was keeping goods from going in and out, and they knew he was going to attack, and they were holed up and scared and all of that stuff. Everything that we'd normally see in that somebody that was, or a city under siege, they just didn't literally have the siege ramps, right? Anything else? I guess I started talking and I didn't ask if you something that stood out to you this week.
Looks to me like Ezekiel was one of the first to UFO.
Yes, yeah, may have been the first to see a UFO. And we get on to, what is it, 28, 29? Is that when the Gog and Magog and the...
First 4 chapters deals with that.
Oh, yes.
Wheel within the wheel.
Right, yeah. I heard people, saying that that they thought it might have been an attack helicopter, the wheel within a wheel and so forth. And it's like, whatever.
Just kind of was thinking about how it says that sin always wants more from us.
Yes,
You know, yeah.
never satisfied. Yes, sin always wants more.
And I wondered what he was describing when he said around his waist was fire and below his waist was like shining metal.
Yeah.
And you just think, what?
Oop. Is that me?
Because he couldn't describe it because he had no idea.
Right.
We have no idea.
Exactly. Yeah, it's kind of like when I was talking about trying to describe heaven. Yeah, trying to describe the creatures and everything. People have also said that it was a set of gyroscopes, that you had 2 that were facing this way and 2 facing this way and 2 facing that way, so that you could go in any direction, up, down, sideways, back and forward without having to turn. Gyroscopes would help with that. Again, who knows? Just one of those things that he did the best he could. Mm-hmm. And also remember that whatever he did see and he wrote down was in Hebrew, and it's been translated. So it always reminds me, I had some people one time that were talking about how the Bible couldn't be true because in Genesis, and it talks about these are the things that you can't eat, and it goes all these birds that you couldn't eat, and the very last one is the bat. And they said, God should have known that a bat is not a bird, that it's a mammal, right? Well, it is, but in those days, they may have qualified it as not as what we do, call it a bird and a bat or a bird and whatever, but just anything with wings that flies. They're all flying creatures. And they just use that word to mean all of them. So anyway, difference in language and so forth.
Well, less like who made up the word mammal? Did we?
Yeah, we did this. Yes, well,
I mean, you know what I'm saying.
yes. Actually, part of that was John Ray, my ancestor. Yeah, I know he might not be, but I claim him anyway. He started working on a classification system. I think I've told you all this, of classifying animals and plants and different things. And he was told he had to sign a creed to stay working at the Cambridge where he was at. And he didn't believe that you should sign a creed, that, the Bible says you should say your yes, yes, and no, no, that should be enough. And it was against his beliefs to sign a creed, so he refused. They kicked him. He lost his job. They kicked him out of the Royal Academy of Sciences. And then a guy named Carolus Linnaeus came along and finished his work. And so Linnaeus is the one that gets all the credit for doing it. But John Ray started it. So, yeah, my claim to fame. Oh. Yeah.
And I just think, you think after World War II that this would not be
Yeah.
an issue. And if my parents were alive, I know they would think, what?
Yeah.
After all the sacrifice.
Yep. Yeah. Everything that happened to the Jewish people, yeah. I was always afraid that the U.S. would turn against them. I hope not, but you can never tell. Yes. All right, well, let's stand and we'll join hands and we'll sing our dismissal chorus. And I'll try to follow the questions a little more closely next week.